Living at Cause with Michelle Saffin. The MKS Assists team acknowledges the traditional custodians of the lands and seas on which we live and work. We pay our respects to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander ancestors and elders, and acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded. I particularly recognise the connection of traditional custodians to the Woiwurrung land and waters on which this podcast is recorded. Always was, always will be. Hello and welcome to the podcast. I am so excited. Today is the kind of episode that I've always wanted to do, but I never did. But actually, it was my birthday last weekend, so now is the time. I'm going to run you through 25 things I've learnt being 25. So I'm just going to run through the list, give you a little bit of a description of each of those things. It's just supposed to be a little bit of fun. There are some fun ones, there are some serious ones, just some things that I've learned going into my 25th lap around the sun. So starting off with number 1, the hard parts of life are where you learn and grow. This has been a big one for me lately, especially, but I guess it's been a bit of an adjustment. Just thinking about the harder things that you go through as a blessing, and shifting my focus not to toxic positivity, but just into gratitude for the lessons and the growth that I get from the things that are a challenge at the time. And I think that's probably reflected, like I've done some pretty full-on episodes of the podcast, the last few episodes. You can go back and listen to me talking about being in a psych hospital and going through having a broken ankle. All those things have been hard lessons, but I've learnt so much from them. So certainly the hard parts of life, learning through them and growing through them is something that I've really come to appreciate leading up to this birthday. Number 2, my brain is wired differently, and that's something that I'll have to accept. I think for a really long time, like I've been discussing with my psychologist, that I've probably had mental health issues forever, for a really long time. And so we're really trying to get into this focus about the fact that my mind's wired differently, but focusing on that and not then moving through blaming or believing these narratives that aren't true, that my inner critic likes to feed me. So just working through how to accept that, and again, not toxic positivity, but just shifting my focus away from the negative narrative that I've been fed and feeding myself, and focusing on the fact that this is just because my brain's wired a bit differently, and so X, Y, and Z are going to need to be part of my life. Number 3, glandular fever is the hidden STI. Earlier this year I got glandular fever, and so I am now an ambassador for glandular fever being an STI that we don't think about and we don't talk about. For one, the reason might be that often people get glandular fever when they're a little bit younger, so maybe it's not like me. I have to tell you, I've had some hilarious conversations with family, and they're like, oh, maybe you drank from a cup at a bar and that person had glandular. And I'm like, Mum, if you're listening, it's because I was making out with boys. I'm sorry, I hate to break it to you, but it absolutely was. I have no idea who gave it to me. They weren't unwell at the time. So glandular fever is the hidden STI, and you should definitely all be looking out for that one, because boy, it is rough. Some people get glandular fever and they're like, I don't want to say fine, but they don't get impacted that badly. But I was so unwell with glandular fever. And now if I push myself even a little bit too hard in terms of being busy, I'm stuck in bed for 3 days. It's full on. So watch out, gals. Gals, guys, and ladies, you got to watch out for that one. Number 4, my self-awareness will not make up for someone else's lack of self-awareness. I actually had this one, number 4, written a little bit differently, but then Flex Mummy posted a reel on Instagram with this line, that my self-awareness will not make up for someone else's lack of self-awareness, and it hit me for 6. I was like, oh my goodness, that is exactly the feeling and the sentiment that I had written in other ways that were not nearly as succinct. And this has been a really big lesson, I think, particularly in the last year, as I continue to do so much work on self-development, my mental health, jumping into being a business owner, a CEO. I'm doing all of this work, and other people in my life maybe aren't doing that work or haven't done that work yet. And so this has been a huge lesson for me. And when Flex Mummy posted that, I was like, yeah, this is exactly the sentiment that I've been trying to get across that I couldn't really say in a succinct way before now. Just let it sink in for a second that my self-awareness will not make up for someone else's lack of self-awareness. I think it's a really powerful sentiment and something to certainly keep just in the back of your mind for as you grow and develop, and maybe other people are sort of not in that place at this moment in time. And this lesson is definitely in conjunction with number 5, which is when someone shows you who they are, believe them. I think it's a saying and a phrase that does get thrown around a bit, and sure, it's a cliche, but it's true. It's kind of like they say, stereotypes can be used negatively, but they don't come from nowhere. This saying, this phrase, it gets thrown around, but it's not, because it didn't come from truth and fact. When someone shows you who you are, you have to believe them. I think the full saying also includes believe them the first time. I've actually left that out because I think there's a lot of reasons why we can miss it the first time, especially when we're talking about people who we love and relationships that are shifting and changing. It can be hard to accept that. But when they do show you who they are, it's best to believe them. It'll cause you a lot more peace and serenity, and it will help you sort of have a more easeful relationship. I know in the times where I've sort of rejected believing where they're at, it's caused a lot of heartbreak down the line. So it can save you some heartbreak, which we're all about. Number 6 is that gluten is not my friend. This is definitely literally only in the last 6 months I've come to realize this. So when I went into hospital, I had been sort of throwing around like a FODMAP allergy, I guess you would say, a FODMAP allergy, a FODMAP intolerance. But if anyone is listening right now and has looked into that or even gone through that process, you'll know that FODMAP diets are so full on. You have to really limit everything, go back to eating basically nothing but some vegetables, and then slowly add things, then take it back away, then add a different thing, then take that back away. Monitor your symptoms. It's very, very intensive. So I would say probably 3 years ago now, I had a look into doing all of that, and I just wasn't in the mental space where I could commit to doing that FODMAP diet. And you really have to do it like properly, to the book, by the book, for it to work. So I wasn't in the headspace for that. But then I figured out that I was going to be going into hospital for about a month, and I thought, well, I'm still feeling really unwell in my stomach. We know now that there is a relationship between gut issues and mental illness or mental health. And in hospital, all of the food is taken care of. So I can just write down dietaries, and then it's very limited amount of restraint that I have to do. I won't be surrounded by meals that have gluten, and I'm unlikely to come across heaps of food like at home, in the pantry. There's other people who obviously eat gluten. It's a little bit harder. So I went into hospital and I said I was gluten-free, and they provided all of the food for me. Sure enough, it was the best I'd ever felt. So it wasn't the full FODMAP thing, but now I know that gluten is a really bad thing for me. It is absolutely not my friend. And it's made a really big difference to my stomach and how I'm feeling. It's impossible for me to track how that has related to my mental health. if you've listened to past episodes, you'll hear about all the things that I'm trying for my mental health, but I don't think there's any harm in not feeling unwell all of the time, that's for sure. So yes, I've broken up with gluten, everyone. Number 7, you don't have to think about astrology every day to be using it as a support tool. Again, this is something that I've been working on for a couple of years, but it really has hit home in the last 12 months about using astrology as a tool to support me, to help me in my business, in my personal life, for my mental health, but it's not something that I have to use every single day. I went through a period where I really hyperfixated on astrology. I was learning, I was reading, I was really deep diving into it. But that's not a sustainable way. So then I almost felt guilty, to be honest, that I wasn't using astrology each and every single day, and I felt like I wasn't worthy of using astrology because I wasn't living in it, or I wasn't using it as part of a business. It wasn't something, I'm not going to become a practitioner in any of the astrology skills, but that doesn't need to be true. I use it and love using it as a support tool, but I don't need to be using it every day. It's a touchstone, it's a tool, it's another thing in my toolkit to look after myself, to aid my business. And that sort of learning curve has really been supported by Jazz Borey, who's my coach. I'm actually in her Star Society container at the moment, which is really about using astrology as a tool, but not needing to be in it every single day. Number 8, this is a bit of a heavier one, but I've learned that psych hospitals are not only for people in crisis. Again, I have an episode on this, but it's been a really big learning curve about, again, using things and having things in your toolkit that you can use, but you don't need to be in touch with them all the time, or you don't need to use them only at certain points. You can actually dip in and out of all of these skills and tools that you have to aid having, the best life possible, aka living at cause. So this is just another tool now that I have in my toolkit, which is going into hospital for a bit, getting TMS treatment, or being part of the group programs. It's just another toolkit that I have for living at cause, and it doesn't require me to be in crisis to access that tool or that support. Number 9, the connection between physical body and mental plane is no joke. And this goes back to number 6 about gluten being not my friend, but also just I've been doing a lot of research, I would say, particularly in the last 12 months, about all these new ways of thinking about mental illness, particularly depression, and how physical exercise and what you're eating, how your body processes food, has a really strong connection to your mental plane. So your mental health and how you think about things and your state of being or your state of mind. And so for me, if we're talking and thinking about living at cause, then that is something to really take hold of and consider. I think it's become particularly clear for me, not only with this new gluten diet, but I think even more so since having the broken ankle and not being able to exercise. For a time I couldn't even walk without a lot of support, as in physical aids. It's really, really become so clear to me how important physical activity is, not to the point of running marathons. I don't think I'll ever be a marathon runner, and that's okay. But even just getting out and being able to go for a little walk or go for a swim, go outside and be free to go outside because you can physically is so important. So that connection between physical body and mental plane, I've certainly explored. I guess you would say like quite an extreme version of having that taken away from me, that physical access to my body. And so it's really, really important now. I know how important it is because of the connection to the mental plane and all the things that it does for you. They say it's food, diet, well, diet is food, exercise, and that's like so key, such key pillars to your mental health as well as your physical health, and it's undeniable to me now, and that sucks. I'm not going to lie to you. Physical exercise, not really my jam, but it is so important, and there are ways that you can make it fun. And I think that's the biggest thing I've learned now, is that I'm not going to limit myself to only one kind of physical exercise or one type of model, but I am going to incorporate physical activity into my life as much as my body is able to going forward, because it is such an important element of my mental health, of the mental plane, of everything that you're doing in life. Number 10, having my nails makes me feel like 10 out of 10. This is so true. I was trying to explain, for those on YouTube, you can see my set right now. And I posted on Instagram, would have been a couple of weeks ago now, with another set that I got. My girlfriend has found this incredible nail salon not too far from home that does nail designs, and I'm literally obsessed. And yeah, it just makes me feel so much more confident. It makes me feel way more put together. So I think I knew this about myself, but I kind of put it in the try not to think about basket. Just because financially, to get your nails done by a professional, obviously there is a cost to that. But even when I do my nails myself, I still feel 100 times better just about life, and I feel more confident, more outgoing, ready to go, more put together in terms of like leaving the house. I feel a bit more ready to go. I don't know, it really does something in my brain. So having my nails done, I feel like a 10 out of 10, and that's definitely something that's been solidified for me this year. Number 11 is reading for pleasure is worth making time for. This is huge. For the past couple of years, I've really tried to get back into my reading. I mean, as a young girl, I read so many books, and I read at a higher level than other kids my age. I just really loved reading, absorbing myself in other worlds. I was so passionate about it. And then once I got into VCE, which for those not in Australia, VCE is like the end of your high school. So you do a lot of reading of English novels. I was in English language as well as normal English, so I was doing heaps of reading for those. And I also picked global studies and revolution. So if you have any familiarity with the VCE system, you will know that I was reading a lot of content for school. And then I went to university, and it's the same. They assign you more reading than someone could complete in a year for each week, for each subject. So I was doing a lot of reading that wasn't for fun. It wasn't for pleasure. And I've really been focusing in on pleasure and fun lately. And reading is pleasurable for me. So I'm definitely going to be making time for that going forward. I really, really enjoy it. And it's also a great thing to have to chat to other people about what they're reading, what I'm reading. So certainly reading for pleasure, I'm going to be making time for that. Number 12 is that I am creative. I've written this in my notes in capital letters. I am creative. I'm yelling it at myself. For a long time, because I wasn't very good, and I'm still not very good at drawing or painting. And again, this is one of those things where I think societally we tend to put things in boxes, like either you're creative because you're good at art in a very traditional sense, or you're not. And so I just had this self-belief that I wasn't creative because I couldn't draw very well. I couldn't create amazing portraitures in paintings, so therefore I wasn't creative. But that's not true. Actually, I'm very creative. I love knitting. I love sewing. I love painting. I'm not very good at it, in quotation marks for those listening. I'm not very good at it, but I love it, and I am very creative. I'm also creative in the way that I put together content for social media. I'm creative in the way that I organize things for myself and for my clients. I am a really creative person, and that seems like an obvious statement perhaps to some of you, but it wasn't something that was clear to me, and so I've really been getting to the base of that self-belief and shifting that mindset that just because I'm not going to make money from art doesn't mean that I'm not a creative person. Number 13, again, a bit more of a serious one, But number 13 is I'm not sad that I don't have heaps of friends. I just struggle with friendships that have ended without closure. This has been a real battling point, something that's really come up in my therapy, my self-work, my hypnotherapy appointments even, just about friendships, and often it's kind of referred to as the sister wound. So just working through what's going on with that, even through inner child work. And I've come to the realization that I'm not sad about having a small group of friends. I have a small quantity but high quality friends. And for me, that is what's important to my friendships, is that I can turn to these people at any point to celebrate, also to grieve. I will call on these people because they're truly my people. But what I struggle with is that I've had a number of friendships that have ended without closure. And so in a sense, I'm mourning those, and I'm sort of struggling to get myself closure about what occurred with those friends, with those friendships, and then the ending of those friendships. So that's something that I'll continue to think about and work on going forward. Number 14, journaling daily is healing. Again, like I was saying, a lot of what I've done lately in the past year is about this toolkit for success, this toolkit that lets me live at cause every day. And journaling, I find, is so healing. Something about the ritual of putting pen to paper just sets my Virgo heart on fire. It is so healing for me. And so that is something that I am going to really try and do daily going forward. I said earlier about other support tools that they're not things I need to touch with daily, but I think for me, journaling is something that I want to be doing daily because it is so healing for me. Number 14 is my mistake. Number 15 is my relationship with money needs work. I think I've known this again for a little while, but it's really come to light this year as other things have fallen into place, as I've stepped away from the traditional 9-to-5 workforce and stepped into my own business. There is some work there to be done about my relationship with money. So this is less of a sort of resolved learning and more something that I've learned in the past year that I'm going to take into being 25 and work with for the next 12 months. And hopefully this episode in 12 months' time about what I've learned turning 26 will have some more, not necessarily resolutions, but some more outcomes for my relationship with money and the healing that's happened through that journey about finances, abundance, money, and of course, as always with money things, self-worth. Number 16, being too much for some doesn't mean I'm too much for all. I actually have this as a screensaver on my Apple Watch. It was something that was a prompt that came up in an astrology container I'm in for Leo season, and I've kept it around because I think it really calls to me this idea that people have called me too much because I'm too opinionated or too full on or too unwell, that I'm too much of something, of anything, of everything, and just really coming back to this belief that I don't believe I'm too much for everyone. I just maybe haven't found my place or my people or my career. You know, it came up a lot in a volunteer role that I did, being too much, in an old job that I had. And so I've shifted and changed away from those because I know I'm not too much for everyone. I've just got to find my spot, my people, my homies, the right organization, the right group, the right career. Number 17, playing with how I dress, including my hair colours, is fun. Dopamine dressing is the best. For me, I'll just quickly explain, some people might not know. So dopamine dressing is the concept of dressing fun, in quotation marks, for yourself. So often that includes bright colours, it might mean big earrings, it might be coloured hair or hairstyles. It could also mean not bright colours for someone. It could mean, dressing sort of more traditionally what we'd refer to as goth, so dark colours and black, but with lots of textures. It's different for everyone, but for me, it's definitely lots of colours, big fancy fun earrings, playing with my hair colours, because I find I style my hair in quite similar ways, so the hair colours I do play with, having nails done like I mentioned earlier. So yeah, dopamine dressing is 100% something that I love doing, and it's something I'm going to try and incorporate a little bit more. I think I was a really strong dopamine dresser when I was going into the office all of the time, but a little bit lately I've sort of missed that element of life because I've been working from home for myself, alone. There isn't anyone to see, but I want to do that dopamine dressing for myself because it makes me feel better. It's not really necessarily about the fact that I might not see anyone today. It's doing it for myself. Number 18, self-love is a daily practice. I mean, this calls to a lot of the things I've already spoken about, but self-love really is a daily practice. So things like bringing back dopamine dressing for myself, taking time out for myself is so, so important. I was actually on a podcast, doing a podcast recording earlier today with someone else as a guest, and I said, we were talking about scheduling and the fact that self-love, family, friends, relationships, those things are non-negotiables. So if you're running out of time, those are not the things to take away. You've got to look at other things that are going on in your business or your life. Self-love is a daily practice and you have to carve out time for it. And for me, I found that if I don't make a really intentional practice with that, then it doesn't happen. I sort of forget, and then after a few days it's like, oh, why do I feel so shitty? Well, because you haven't loved yourself lately. So self-love is a daily practice, certainly something I'm going to keep doing. Number 19, I love plants, but I'm not the best plant mum. This is hard to admit. This is sad to admit. I love plants. I mean, I love nature. I love the outdoors. So it's no surprise that I like bringing elements of that into my life. I have flowers at home. I have a terrarium, dried flowers. I have so many different types of plants around me. But I must admit, the ones that are living, so they're not dried flowers, I really struggle with. I have a pot plant right now. It is looking so sad. It's supposed to be an easy to look after plant, and I don't know what's wrong. I keep cutting off dead leaves, thinking the energy is then going to be used on the live leaves, and it's like that gives it more energy to kill off more leaves. It's got about 5 stalks left. It's so sad, but I don't want to get rid of it because I'm so attached to making it come back. I think I'll try and repot it and see if that works. But yes, this is a lesson that I love plants, but I'm not the best plant mum. And so perhaps I need to just get outdoors a little bit more and stop bringing the poor plants inside to die. Something to consider, perhaps. Number 20, looking after yourself is not selfish. In fact, you're a better friend, sibling, daughter, etc. because of it. This is a big one for me. I am what I like to refer to as a recovering people pleaser. And so I'm trying to find this balance. And I think I'm nearly there, to be honest, but it has been a long period of going from being a people pleaser to then perhaps going too far the other way and being sort of borderline self-absorbed. So now I'm coming back to finding that balance between looking after myself, because that's so important and it's not selfish, but also using that to fuel me being a better friend, fuel being a better sibling, a better daughter, a better virtual assistant, all of those things. So looking after yourself is never selfish, but it's about the balance of the things around that I'm still working on a little bit. But certainly self-love, it's a daily practice and it's never selfish. Number 21, water is the elixir of life. Drinking it always makes me feel better. I am honestly horrible at drinking water. I am really bad, but I did make a commitment to really try and focus on drinking more water and enacting strategies that help me to do so. So for example, I often now will have a straw in my water because I find I drink a lot more water when I've got a straw. making sure that I put water near me at all times. So if I'm at this desk, having water. If I go to another desk, take my water. When I eat lunch, take the water over there. It does kind of end up feeling like I'm drowning in water bottles at times. Like the other day, I did a bit of a clean up in my room and there were about 5 water bottles. And I thought, well, this is a bit insane. You don't need 5 water bottles in a small space where you do mostly sleeping and not much else. But it always makes me feel better when I do drink lots of water and when I am hydrated. So it's something I'm certainly working on and getting those little tips and tricks that work to trick my brain into drinking water, even when it's freezing in Melbourne. Number 22. My Sun in Virgo, along with the North Node and Mercury in Virgo, means I will shine through my purpose, career, dharma, however you want to say it. This has been such a powerful realization. So I've had my natal chart and I had it read initially by Jazz Bory. I would say I've probably been in touch with her and her work for at least 3 years. But having only stepped into my business recently, so within the last 12 months I've gone full-time in the business, and stepping into full-time work in my own business has really shown me how that placement is going to shine, how I'm going to fulfill my Sun in Virgo, how the North Node and Mercury being there makes sense. It's certainly something that I have really come to realize. I think something that she says about her charts in general, which I certainly align with, is that not everything is meant for you for this point in time. So you might really align with it in the past, in the present, or in the future. And this is one of those placements that I was like, yeah, okay, sure. But I didn't really feel it. And I thought, oh, okay, that's fine. I'm studying at TAFE, so when I get to the end of that, I'll find it. Or when I was in the university degree, once I get to the end of that. And those things didn't really work out, and I wasn't aligning with my career. I wasn't feeling like my purpose was within that. And now that I'm in my own business, I'm sure you can tell that being on this podcast and talking about what I do, it lights me up. I love it. I love what I do. And for me, the biggest thing has been, even when the business is not calling in as much abundance financially as I would like, I'm still obsessed with what I do. There is no part of me that wants to jump ship. There is no part of me that wants to go back to what I was doing before. There is no part of me that's like, oh, well, I guess it's not a really big deal. I'll just go and do something else. Like, all of me is committed to doing what I do right now. And that just goes to show that this part of my chart is meant for this part of my life. So that's been a huge realization and something that I was struggling with that placement, and now I just see it coming out in my life, and I'm so happy to be in this part where I get to explore that part of my chart. Number 23. Activities that require doing are most enjoyable for me. If I can get my hands dirty, the more the better. This is so true, and I think it's a realization that maybe some of you will align with coming out of lockdown because of the COVID-19 pandemic, where we weren't out and about, we weren't able to do much. Especially for me, also, I spent a long time on the couch not being able to move very freely because of my broken ankle. So I did really crave doing things with my hands, and I ended up re-picking up knitting, which I hadn't done since I was a child, because I wanted something to do with my hands. I literally said to Mum, I was like, I cannot sit and watch Netflix anymore. I can't even feel like picking up a book is something I want to do anymore. I just want to do something. And so knitting, sewing, even perhaps I've been considering getting into gardening. Also recently I've had the opportunity to rebuild a car for the purposes of mud racing, sort of like a buggy. And that was like, it lit me up. It was the coolest experience because I could get my hands dirty. It was learning by doing. It was certainly something that I really, really enjoyed. So it's something that I've learned, particularly over the last year, I think, because we weren't able to do that and I wasn't able to do that as much. And so I'm coming back to that, like really that it's a really grounding and enjoyable, fun experience for me to do things with my hands. Number 24. I'm a cat person at heart, but dogs aren't so bad either. I think this is something that's been reaffirmed to me in the last year rather than a new learning. I was always a cat person. We had cats growing up, and I wanted a kitten because I wanted the experience of having a kitten after the cats passed away. They passed away. We looked after a friend's cat as a favour to them for a while, and she passed away. And then my brother somehow won over my parents and we got a dog. I was not happy. Can you tell? Not happy. I was about as happy as I'm told I was as a toddler when I found out I had a brother, not a sister. Extremely not happy. But I did fall in love with our dog because at the time he was a puppy and he was so cute. I might try and edit a photo in here for those on YouTube. But he was so adorable. And then he grew up. For context, our dog is a German Shepherd. So it's like having a miniature pony in the house all the time. And it drove me nuts to begin with. I really didn't get along with him. But over time, the dog's grown on me. And because now I'm used to having a dog, I don't feel so uncomfortable around other dogs. So I think definitely I'll always be a cat person at heart. But now I'm getting more familiar with dogs. And I don't mind seeing dogs out in the wild. I'll even call them cute from time to time if they're truly cute. Don't bring a chihuahua at me. Don't bring me a chihuahua. But overall, I'm getting more okay with dogs as time goes on. Number 25, and this is the last one because I turned 25, so 25. I'm not where I thought I would be, but I'm somewhere better. I was reflecting on the fact that turning 25, it's a quarter of a century. It's kind of the first big birthday you have after 21. And obviously, like me and some friends, we were saying to each other that I don't know, I think a lot of people feel this. It kind of feels a bit crazy, but because of COVID, we didn't lose years, but they sort of meld into one. We didn't get to celebrate our birthdays maybe in the way that we thought I would. So not only is it a big birthday, but it's also sort of the most significant celebration that I've been able to have with friends, family, sort of in an unrestricted way in a couple of years. And being 25, I think I had all these assumptions when I was a little bit younger, or even just thinking and reflecting on the number 25, thinking I would be at certain points in my life, thinking that I would have a partner, thinking that I wouldn't be living with my family, thinking that I would have a degree or qualification of some sort. All these assumptions that I'd made about where I would be at 25, and those things have not come into fruition. But when I think about it, when I truly sit with it, and I did some journaling around my birthday and around this fear of not being where I thought I should be, and that 25 quickly leads to 30, and where do I think I should be then? And I just stopped and I took some time to think about, well, where am I actually now at this point, turning 25, going to my 25th lap around the sun? Where am I? And I'm somewhere way better than I could ever have imagined. I own a business. I work from home. I have flexibility that I've always desired in one way or another. I'm looking after myself. My mental health is on the up and up. I'm reading for passion and fun, which is something my inner child just is so joyous about. All these things, and it's well, I actually think I'm somewhere better. It's just not a place that I could have even imagined for myself 5 years ago. And that's pretty amazing. That's pretty epic. And for me, that's what living at Cause is. That is what living at Cause has got me, to look back and be well, I couldn't have even imagined myself here 5 years ago, and yet I've made all of these things happen by living at Cause day in, day out, month after month. I have got myself to this incredible place, this place that is even better than I imagined for myself. And that's pretty awesome. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast today. I really, really appreciate it. And I hope you've had a bit of fun today learning with me, as well as a few of those serious moments. If you are looking at any of my content, I mentioned a couple of times I'm a virtual assistant. So if you do need help in your business with living at cause as well, then you can find me at MKS Assists. Otherwise, I'd love to hear from you in the DMs there. How did you find this podcast episode? And I'm sure we will speak soon. All my love. Living at Cause is presented by Michelle Saffin and produced by MKS Assists. Follow her on Instagram at MKS Assists, and don't forget to subscribe on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. Video recordings can now be found on YouTube at MKS Assists. Subscribe for how-to videos and notifications of the latest podcast recording.